Anda masih menyaksikan CNBC Indonesia Prime Words bersama saya Safrina Nasution, dan kita masih bergabung dengan Unicef Representative Indonesia, Maniza Zaman. Maniza, thank you so much for still joining us. Now, in the last segment, we're going to talk about a real increasing threat for everyone, the climate change. What can actually be done to address climate change risk and how to mitigate its impact for the children in Indonesia?
Thank you for asking that question. Look, it's a crisis. The climate crisis is a child rights crisis because we're just seeing so much unraveling of all the gains we've made for children. And in the future, that can worsen unless we take action now. So in terms of really what UNICEF is calling for are a few things. One is to prioritize children and young people's issues in the climate finance discussions. Second is to prevent the worst from happening by really urgently cutting down on greenhouse gas emissions. Third is really looking at adaptation. How can social services that really serve children, such as education, health, and others, how can those be adapted from the worst impacts of the climate change and crisis that we're facing? And fourth is engage young people, children, educate them so that they can be what they are always and continue to be, our agents of change. They can be the torchbearers of a more hopeful, a more sustainable planet that they can benefit from, and so can we. So those are some of the big picture areas that we're really looking at as UNICEF.
Well, beautiful. And lastly, what are the UNICEF key priorities for the next years, especially in Indonesia?
Again, I want to kind of go where perhaps I started, saying that Indonesia has made a lot of progress on child rights on many fronts. We have had a setback because of COVID-19. We are having a setback again because of the climate crisis. So in all that, if we had to look at some of the real areas that we want to be looking at, first and foremost, I think, really to recognize that there is great diversity and there are disparities in the country, meaning that there are certain children that are being left behind. So a laser-sharp focus on really those most disadvantaged, perhaps in remote areas, children who need greater attention. On what kinds of issues? In terms of the stunting issue that we spoke about, of course, really further accelerating, the reduction of stunting, as well as looking at other forms of malnutrition, because at the same time, we are seeing an increasing trend in obesity as well in certain pockets of the population. So we need to be a bit careful. We need to address the learning loss that's happened because of the school closures and the pandemic. So that's another area that we really need to look at and focus on early and foundational skills for children. Right. That's another area. I think the third would be around health, in particular around immunization, because we saw a little bit of a backsliding in immunization during COVID-19. We need to recover that to make sure every single boy and girl in this country has the full set of vaccinations that they need, right? I think another area is looking at water quality and safely managed sanitation, because a strong linkage, obviously, with health, nutrition. Supporting the government to have a really good protection system in terms of child protection from harmful practices, from other types of threats and risks, so child protection. And maybe I would say one more area would be what we call social policy, which is really looking at how our budgets and funding spent on children's issues, that's one area, and bringing data and information on children's rights for decision making. Last but not least, we spoke about it, climate change.
Climate change.
Of course, and because that is kind of underpinning lives, every single day for children. So I think it's a lot, but we work in partnership, and that's what's important. This is not what UNICEF alone does. We support the government at all different levels, and we work with a multiple array of partners as well. Yeah,
It's challenging, but it is an absolute continuing progress.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for all that UNICEF does towards a better world for our children.
Thank
you so much. And thank you so much for also joining us in CNBC
Thank you.
Indonesia, Maniza. A pleasure and an honor
Thank you.
to have you.
Thank you so
Dan
much.
demikian dialog bersama dengan Maniza Zaman, Unicef Representative in Indonesia di CNBC Indonesia Prime Words. CNBC Indonesia Beyond Business.